Hello everyone, today we would like to talk about chapter 10. So chapter 10 is the market inefficiency, and in this market efficiency we talk about one special case, which is externalities. Okay, so first let's see what we have learned previously. So actually this chapter is related to chapter 7 and chapter 8 about welfare economics. And previously we noticed that consumer surplus is the differences between market price and willingness to pay, right? And we also learned that producer surplus is the differences between market price and the cost. And we also noticed that in chapter 8, imposing tax such as maybe the tax on gasoline, tax on cigarette or alcohol will actually create a debit loss and reduce overall welfare of their economy. Okay, so this is what we have learned in chapter 7 and chapter 8. And in this chapter, we would like to learn another type of market distortion, which is externality. So in this chapter, we will learn what is an externality and why do externalities make market outcomes inefficient. How can government do to solve for this problem of externalities? Okay, so those are three questions we try to find answers in this chapter. Here is the question for you. So, what's the optimal level of pollution? If you think about this question, what is the optimal level of pollution? I think for me, I want zero pollution, right? For you, I'm not sure, but I hope your answer will be okay, the lower the possible, right? So most of the time, probably most of people would like zero pollution. However, why can't we have zero pollution? Why can't we have zero pollution? Now, one of the foundations that we learn from chapter 1 is markets are usually a good way to allocate resources, right? To optimize economic activity if we assume the market is perfectly competitive or market is competitive, okay? And in absence of market failure, the competitive market outcome is efficient, maximize the total surplus. However, one type of the market failure is externality. We will learn the other type of market failure in the later chapter. For example, the market structure, not competitive market, but monopoly market. So one type of the market failure is externality. And externality means the uncompensated impact of one person's action on the well-being of a bystander. So if someone beside me smoke, okay, with a cigarette, then I actually would have negative externality. That makes sense? If the factory they polluted the air, then the people who live near that factory actually they also suffer the negative externality. Okay? So externality could be positive, could be negative, okay, depending on whether the impact of the bystander is adverse or beneficial. So for example, currently, people will take a flu shot, right? So the flu shot will actually decrease the people who get flu, right? So that will actually provide positive externality. Now let's see. For the self-interested buyers and sellers, they always neglect the external cost or benefits of their actions. So with externality, the market outcome is not efficient. With externality, the market outcome is not efficient. Governments can sometimes improve the market outcomes with the externalities. Okay, so sometimes we will use the public policy such as tax, such as some subsidy, okay, to improve the efficiency if the market suffer externality. So for example, externality was is definition. We define externality as the cost or benefit of the market activity that will affect a third party. So for example, as I just talked about before, pollution, the factory's pollution will affect the people who live nearby, right? And we say if I take a flu shot, it actually has a positive externality because the people who like work, work around me or like the people who live with me, they would probably would not get food short. Okay, if I already get a food short. So this is the externality. It could be the cost, could be the benefit of a market activity that affect the third party. Market failures occurs when there is an inefficient allocation of resources in the market. Externalities is one type of market failure. So let's look at some examples of externalities. Could be positive, could be negative. Okay, so for example, the exhaust from automobiles is a positive or negative externalities. I think it's definitely a negative externalities because it creates smoke that other peoples have to breathe. As a result of this externality, drivers will actually tend to pollute too much because they will neglect the exhaust from their automobiles, right? And then what can the government do? The federal government, they attempt to solve this type of a problem by setting emission standards for cars. And it can also taxes on gasolines to reduce the amount of people drive. Therefore, the exhaust of an automobile has a negative externality. Okay? Barking dog. Barking dog will create what type of externality? I think barking dog for me, it will create a negative externality because neighbors are disturbed by the noise. However, the dog owners do not bear the full cost of the noise, and therefore they tend to take too few precautions to prevent their dogs from barking. So this is what we say. The barking dog might create negative externality. Okay, now let's look at another one. Restore historic buildings can convey what type of externality? I think it will create a positive externality because people who work or ride by them can actually enjoy the beauty and the sense of history that these buildings provide. However, building owners do not get the full benefit of restoration, and therefore they tend to discard older buildings too quickly. Okay? There are many local governments what they can do response to this type of problem or issues. They can regulating the destruction. They can try to solve this problems by regulating the destructions of historical buildings and provide tax breaks or tax benefits to owners who restore them. So, restore historic buildings can convey a positive externality. Now, research, R&D. So, research into new technology will actually provide a positive externality because it creates a knowledge that other people can use. However, you can see the inventors cannot capture the full benefits of their inventions. So they tend to devote too few resources into research. And as far as we know, research would requires a lot of money, right? So what can government do? The federal government, they can address these problems like partially, okay, through the patent system, which gives the inventors exclusive use of their inventions for limited time. So those are the government policies can do to promote research and development. Okay. So let's look at first the examples of negative externalities. We will do the analyze through consumer surplus, producer surplus, and total surplus. Okay. So let's see the air pollution from a factory. This is definitely a negative externality. So, like the neighbor's barking dog, noises, pollution, health risk to others from secondhand smoke, or talking on cell phone while driving makes the roads less safe for others. Those are the examples we can treat as negative externalities. And negative externalities will actually create a special cost. And this is what we call the social cost. So in with the negative externalities, the social cost of the goods includes not only the private cost, which will be directly to the sellers, but also the external cost that values or negative impact on the bystander. So in with externality, with especially with negative externalities, now the cost will include in two parts, and this is what we call the social cost. Okay, the social cost will include in two parts. The first one will be the original cost that we learned before, so cost to sellers. Okay, it will also create another type of a cost, which will be external cost. Okay, so we would like to say maximizing the producer surplus and the consumer surplus is not the same as what we done before. So here, I would like to show you one example. We will use this example to analyze, okay? You can see this is the market for gasoline. We have the demand curve, downward sloping, okay? And then we have the supply curve. So that supply curve measures the cost to sellers, measures the cost to sellers, supply curve. However, without any market externality, we can find out the equilibrium price, right? So equilibrium price is the intersection point of demand and supply curve at $2.25 gallons. Okay, so that will be the market equilibrium. So you can see here, I put the supply curve, another one is private cost. If now we have external cost, because of this is the market for gasoline, and consuming gasoline will actually create some pollutions to the air, right? So it will result in external cost. So the external cost, we just say, okay, for example, $1 per gallon, $1 per gallon. What will happen? It will result in social cost. And social cost will equal to the cost to sellers, which will be our original supply curve, okay? Plus external cost. So then what we can do, you can see this is our original demand and supply. This is the price, this is the quantity, okay? This is the demand curve, and this is the original supply curve. This is our original supply curve, okay? And supply curve here we can call is a cost or private cost to sellers. But now with using gasoline will actually create negative externalities. And then we measure this external cost by the number, okay? $1 per gallon. So it will actually shift the supply curve to the left hand side, okay? So this will be our social cost. This is our social cost. Okay, this is our social cost and the differences between the social cost, the vertical differences between social cost and private cost here. This one, okay, is our external cost equal $1. Okay, so from the graph you can see the vertical distance. Okay, $1 per gallon will be external cost. It will shift this supply curve vertically, okay, by $1, and then we will result in a new cost curve, which will be social cost curve. So you can see with the new social cost curve, we have the new, look at the graph here, okay? With the new social cost curve, we have the new intersection point. Originally, this is our original equilibrium point, okay? I mark it as point A. This is point A here. So I say point A here is our market equilibrium points, right? So I should mark it. Is our market equilibrium point. However, with the social cost, now we have the new point here, point B, okay? So point B here, we call point B as a social optimum. is the social optimum point, social optimum status. Okay, because point B is the intersection of social cost and demand curve. So we call it social optimum quality. So after government, sorry, not after government, after we considering the external cost, it will actually result in social optimum quality. And the social optimal quality here is 20. So you can see without considering the external cost, we will have 25 gallons, right? However, after we consider external cost, then the gasoline's quantity will decrease to 20. So at any quantity less than 20, value of the additional gas will exceed the social cost. And at any quantity larger than 20, then the social cost of the last gassing is greater than its values to society. Therefore, we would like to say that we have the social optimum. Okay, we have the social optimum at point B. So point B here measures the social optimum. Okay, so here we have 2 points, point A and point B. So point A is market equilibrium, but after considering external cost or externality, point A is no longer the optimal point. Point B is the optimum point, okay? So this one is social optimum, social optimum. Sometimes governments can do things to reduce the negative externality. And then for government, they try to reduce the negative externality is to internalize, okay, is to internalize the externality. What government can do. So if you are the governor and then you face, okay, you realize now the gaslighting will actually create a larger external cost or will create a negative externality. What you can do, actually, you can try to impose the tax, right? You can impose the tax to discourage people using more gasoline. Therefore, we will use tax. Okay, we will use the tax equal. We use the tax equal using the tax rate equal to external cost to internalize this negative externality. Okay, so in our example, $1 per gallon tax on sellers will make the sellers cost equal to the social cost. So we will impose the tax rate on sellers and then make the social cost equal to the cost to sellers. And this will actually And when those market participants must pay social cost, then the market equilibrium will equal social optimal. So after government imposed tax, now we will have the market equilibrium equal social optimum. So imposing the tax on buyers will actually achieve the same outcomes, make this market equilibrium equal to social optimum quality. So this is the way that we can internalize the externalities if it's negative, okay? And then how about the positive externalities? Let's first look at some examples. There are some examples of positive externalities. For example, being vaccinated, okay, like a flu shots, can actually create positive externality. Or like the research and development will also create knowledges that others can use. Like people going to college can increase the population's education level and then which might improve the literacy of the whole society. Okay, so those are some examples of positive externality. And in the positive externality, we will involve external benefit. Okay, we'll involve external benefit. So for positive externality, we will consider social value. Okay, not social cost. So here we will consider social value. One thing I want to emphasize, okay, for negative externality, you can see we only have one demand curve, but we have two supply curve, right? One is the original supply curve to the sellers, and another one is the supply curve plus the external cost. So for negative externality, we have two supply curves but one demand curve. In positive externality, things will be different. So let me erase this first. It's a little bit hard for me to erase today. So for the positive externalities, actually, it will create the social values. So social values including two parts. One is the values to buyers, or or we say the private value, which will be the direct value to buyers. So here we have two parts. In social value, so social value, we have two parts. The first one will be the private value, which will be the value to buyers. It also has external benefit, okay? I would say external value. So the private value to buyers actually is our demand curve. It's our demand curve. It's our demand curve. Okay. And the social optimum Q can maximize welfare. Okay. So the social value at Q unit will equal to the total the cost. So let's see the examples. This is the market for fruit shorts. Okay. You can have the demand and supply. The external benefit will be $10 per shorts. Okay, this is what we assume. Okay, here we have $10 per short as our external value. So the first one asks you to draw a social value curve. Similar, okay? Let me first draw demand and supply curve here. This is the price. This is the quantity. This is our supply curve, okay? And this is our demand curve. So this demand curve here measures the private private value to buyer. Okay, private value to buyers. But now we have external value, right? Because taking the fruit shorts will create positive externality by $10 per shorts. So what we can do, we will shift this demand curve, okay, upwards by $10. So this will be our social value. The distance, vertical distance between the social value and private value. Here, this part is our external. This is external value, $10. Okay, $10 per shorts. So you can see with the social value and the original supply curve, we have the new points here. Okay, so originally, demand and supply intersect at point A. Okay, so we have point A here is our original equilibrium points. But after we add in the external value, then we have a new point at point B. So point B is the intersection point of social value to the supply curve and supply curve, right? So point B is the new social optimum point after we considering external value. What type of policies could internalize the externality? We know this is a positive externality. So do you think that government imposed tax would work? Impose tax by people who taking fruit shorts? That doesn't work, okay, and that doesn't make sense. Actually, what type of policy can internalize the externality? Government can provide subsidies to the people who would like to take fruit shorts. That will encourage more and more people to take fruit shorts, right? And then it will internalize this positive externality. So let's see. With considering the positive externality, we have the social value here will equal private value, this is our demand curve, plus $10 as the external value. So it will move this demand curve upwards vertically, okay, by $10. So we have the external benefits. The external benefits here will equal $10. And then you can find out the new equilibrium or new social optimum quantity. Okay, then this is our social optimum quantity. Social optimum quantity. Okay. So the new social optimum quantity already taking the $10 as the external benefit. All right. So this is something regarding to negative externality and positive externality. Remember in this graph, when we consider positive externality, we only have one supply curve, but two demand curve. Okay, but two demand curve. Let's look at the externalities summarized. An externality exists when private cost doesn't equal to the social cost, or when private value, here, private value doesn't equal to social value. We will have the third party problems. It will occur when those not directly involved in a market activity experience positive or negative externalities. And if there are negative externalities, actually, the cost will be experienced by the third party, right? Like the gasoline. Using more gasoline will actually create much more external cost on the people, right? And too much of the good is consumed and produced if it is negative externality, okay? For positive externality, like the fruit shorts, it will have the benefits were experienced by the third party. However, too much, or sorry, however, not enough of the goods is consumed and produced. You can see that without considering the external benefits, point A here is the social is the market equilibrium, right? And you can see market equilibrium quantity is smaller than social optimum quantity, which means not enough of the goods is consumed or produced. Then the government can what can government do? If the negative externality exists, then the market quantity will larger than the social optimum quantity. I can draw the graph here, okay? So for if there are negative externality exist, this is P, this is Q, this is demand curve, right? And this is our supply curve. This is the market equilibrium, right? This is the market equilibrium quantity. However, with the negative externality, this is for the social cost. This is social cost with considering the negative externality. You can see the social optimum. I put the Q optimum. The social optimum quantity is smaller than the market equilibrium quantity. So this is what we say, the market quantity larger than social desirable. If positive externality exists, this is the market equilibrium quantity. You can see market quantity here is smaller than social optimum quantity. To remedy the problems, internalize externalities, we can either by taxing. So here government can tax the goods, okay, can tax the goods with negative externalities and provide subsidy to the goods with positive externality. Okay, so this is two ways for government can do to solve the problems when markets suffer externalities, either positive or negative. So the solutions for externalities, as we just talked about, we can use the public policies towards externalities by command and control policies to regulate the behavior directly. So government can impose the regulations on their usage, on, for example, their pollution standards. So those will be the command and control policies. Government can also have the market-based policies to provide incentives that private decision makers will choose to solve the problems on their own. So, for example, we can talk about two approaches. The example for first one, command and control policies, you can limit the quantity of pollution emitted. Okay, so government can set up standards and the requirements that the firms to adopt a particular technology to reduce emissions. Those are what we say command and control policies. For the market-based policies, for example, corrective taxes, impose tax, or subsidy. So, for example, government provides subsidies to encourage people to take more fruit shots. Then that would definitely, okay, government will have this type of the subsidies, but I can decide to take the fruit shots or not. If I take the fruit shots, I can get a subsidy. If I don't take the fruit shots, then I will not get a subsidy. So government provides those type of the policies, and that the private decision makers like us to decide to take the fruit shots or not. This is always the market-based policies. Or the government, for example, this is a very popular market policy, like a tradable pollution permits. So I can talk about this a little bit. Tax here, if the government impose tax on consumption of the gasolines, so the consumers might consider, okay, probably I need to switch to some more energy efficiency cars, right? Or try to cut and then try to cut down the usage of the tax, try to cut down the usage of the gasoline. The ideal corrective tax here will equal ideal tax rate here can equal external cost. Okay? And the ideal subsidy, okay, the ideal subsidy will equal external value or external benefit. So this is for the corrective taxes and subsidies. And for the trading pollution permits, okay, for government, we know that emission tradings is actually the market-based policies. They try to controlling the pollution by providing economic incentives for reducing the emission of pollutants. The concept is also known as CAT or ETS. Okay, so for example, in an emission trading scheme, a government can allocate or sells a limited number of cap limited number of the permits that allows discharge of the specific quantity of the specific pollution over a period of time. And then people, or well, not people, the factories or like the firms and corporations are required to hold those permits equal to the pollutants that they will emit it. Okay, so they will buy those permits from government. And then if they can use some technologies to reduce their pollutants, then they can resell those permits in the market. Therefore, this trading pollution permits actually, it can encourage companies to innovate in order to limit their pollutant and then emit it less pollutant, and then they can resell the permits, right? So this is another way of market-based policies to solve for the externalities. Now let's go back to do a summary of this chapter. So for this chapter, an externalities occurs when a market transaction affects a third party. And if the transaction yields a negative externality, for example, air pollution, then the market quantity here, you can notice from this graph, the market quantity here is larger than social optimum quantity. Okay? So if externality is positive, then you can notice the market equilibrium, market quantity is smaller than social optimum quantity from this graph. Okay? Government can attempt to remedy the problems by several ways, okay? It can internalize externalities by using corrective tax, and then the tax rate can equal to external cost. It can also issue permits to polluters and establish a market where permits can be traded. Okay, this is a very effective way and efficient to control the air pollution. Such policies often protect the environment at a lower cost to society than direct regulation. Okay, so I think those are some contents for chapter 10, and thank you so much.